Classroom of the Elite Season 2, Episode 12. And man, I gotta say, this is definitely the best episode, not only of this second season, but of the first season too. I mean, counting the 2 seasons. This is definitely one of the best episodes. Why am I saying best? This is definitely the best episode because the stuff that happened in this episode, I mean, not only did we get a good fight, this is probably one of the better fights, not only of course, of Classroom of the Elite, but of the whole anime world as a whole in terms of, hand-to-hand fighting. So yeah, that is very epic, something very epic that we saw in this episode. But not only that, we saw another side of Ayanokouji finally shown in this episode, which is actually him defending himself against Ryuuen, because throughout this whole first season, and even in the first season, at the end of the first season, we didn't see Ayanokouji really take things into his own hand, matters into his own hand. He simply let things go, like the natural way they're supposed to go, with a little bit of manipulation here and there, but for the most part he let things go the natural way they're supposed to go. But for the first time in the first and second season, we see him actually take matters into his own hand, and we actually see him, violently take matters into his own hand, because like I said, this is one of the best fight in the whole world of anime hand-to-hand fights. Man, Ryuuen didn't have a chance against Ayanokouji. The way Ayanokouji was handling him, it was so cool, it was so natural, it was so calm. I mean, throughout the whole episode, Ryuuen was talking about like he didn't feel fear, he never felt fear, he was never scared, and only the strong people win, only the strong, powerful characters in the world make it. And man, his world was shattered today because he got beaten down so bad that even at the end of the beating, he finally felt fear. And yeah, I mean, his whole world is now shattered because he thought Ayanokouji was this simple guy that could be pushed over and simply, breaking down. Even his minions, the other people that were besides him thought the same. They thought that Ayanokouji was simply this guy that was too weak, that was going to easily break down. And man, were they wrong, because they all got a beating. Nobody got saved in this episode. I mean, everybody of the 4 people that were present there got a beating so bad that, I mean, they're probably gonna have nightmares going forward from this, because man, they got a really good beating from Ayanokouji, especially Ryuuen, because not only did he get a good beating, the worst beating out of all of them, but he also got his world shattered. I mean, his mind, his mentality, all the things he stood for, he got shattered in this episode by Ayanokouji. And yeah, I mean, Ayanokouji throughout this whole episode was straight fire. I mean, the way he was acting, the way he was conducting himself, the way he was interacting with other people, the way he was interacting with Karuizawa. I mean, it was pretty cool, pretty good for us the watcher, because man, we never seen this side of Ayanokouji. We seen the chill, we seen the strategic, we seen those type of side from Ayanokouji, and even throughout this whole episode we can see them here and there, but we didn't see this side of him beating people down, basically because he simply wanted to. Because even in this episode he explains that all the things that he told Manabe, it was simply because he wanted to do that. Of course he knew that if he basically told Manabe to not fool around with Karuizawa, to not harass Karuizawa, he knew that he will potentially get found out that he was the mastermind. Of course he knew that, and he said that he did all of that because he wanted to beat all of the people that were present there. He wanted to get physical with them. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't even like Ayanokouji was cornered by Ryuuen or anything like that, because no, it is actually the opposite. Ayanokouji was actually just letting them play, just letting them go wild, because all of that was just part of Ayanokouji's plan. So yeah, I mean, Ayanokouji let that all happen because he simply wanted to beat Ryuuen down and his minions. So yeah, I mean, even that confession alone is pretty surprising in this episode, but goes pretty unnoticed because of all the things that happened throughout the episode. So yeah, I mean, and in the last episode, the episode didn't paint a good picture of Ayanokouji because we saw Karuizawa get beaten down. It was one of the horrid episodes to watch, and it didn't paint a good picture of Ayanokouji because we saw this pretty cold guy, didn't actually care what Karuizawa was facing through. He didn't actually care or anything like that. And I already said in the last episode review that I didn't think that was the case. I didn't think that Ayanokouji didn't simply care that he was going to watch some movies with his friends. I actually didn't think that was the case, even though the episode tried to imply that was the case with Ayanokouji, that he simply didn't care. And yeah, I was proven right, because in this episode, basically it starts with him basically ditching his friend because he has to take things into his own own hand. And it makes me wonder if he actually felt bad for Karuizawa or if he is just using her in order for her to be even more loyal to him. But either way, I mean, the fact alone that he went there, took down Ryuuen and his minions and defended Karuizawa and even said some pretty good words to her is good enough in itself, even if he has other intentions in mind. Just that fact alone that he went there, defended Karuizawa himself and beat them down and, you know, spoke some good words to Karuizawa. And yeah, I mean, that alone is pretty good in itself, even if he has other intentions, which we still don't know until this moment. That alone from Ayanokouji shows a lot of character from him, because we don't expect those type of things from Ayanokouji, especially when you think about this, especially when you think about that he doesn't really get anything from going there and beating them down. I mean, even Ryuuen himself explains it, that why is Ayanokouji going to them and trying to stop them if he's actually not gaining anything from doing that. And that is actually true. Ayanokouji doesn't actually gain anything from him going to them and trying to beat them down and trying to defend Karuizawa. So yeah, when you take that into account, it is even more worth noting. It is even more good development from Ayanokouji's side that he went there and defended Karuizawa, because he didn't need it to do that. He didn't expect to gain anything from it. He simply wanted to beat some people down and defend Karuizawa, because actually it was his fault that Karuizawa went through all of that. And he even admits it in this episode, because he even says himself that it is because of him that Karuizawa went through all of that. So yeah, that is even more character development from him. And even further from that, he doesn't even expect forgiveness from Karuizawa. So yeah, I mean, Ayanokouji showed really some good character development, even if it's for other reasons, even if he's not doing it because he simply wants to do it because he feels bad or anything like that. I mean, that is still good character development from him. And yeah, I mean, he simply didn't went there and beat them down. He actually had some people to, you know, to be witnesses, to be backup, because of course if he just went there and beat them down, he could have gotten into a lot of trouble. So of course he had to make sure that he had other people besides Karuizawa herself, you know, testifying for him. And of course he had the teacher and he had Horikita's brother being there to testify that he didn't actually went wild and wanted to beat them down just because that was the case, even though we know that that is actually the case. But I mean, when you take into account that things that Ryuuen and everybody else did to Karuizawa, it is more than justified that he did that. And yeah, I mean, if Karuizawa before liked Ayanokouji, well, now more than ever she's going to like him, because I mean, the thing he did for her in this episode and even the word that he told her, you know, hugging her and things of that nature. I mean, if she liked him before, I mean, now going forward from this episode, she's going to be heads and heels for him. In a way, who can blame her? Because I mean, all this time she's only been used, she's only been, you know, bullied, and now you have this guy called Ayanokouji actually saying that he will defend you, actually saying that he will do anything in his power to not let you suffer it. And he actually made that very clear in this episode when he went there and defending Karuizawa. So yeah, I mean, who could blame her? And another interesting thing that happened in this episode was that Karuizawa didn't actually know that Manabe and her other friends would actually bully her, actually hurt her, because it was all part of Ayanokouji's plan. I thought she already knew that and she simply didn't care because she liked Ayanokouji and she let that slide. But no, in fact, she actually didn't know about that. So yeah, that is actually pretty surprising, because in last episode reviews, I think it was one of the first episode reviews I did of this second season, I talked about that. Karuizawa probably knew already that Ayanokouji did that, but she simply didn't care or brushed it over. But no, I mean, it is actually explained she didn't knew and she found out in this episode, and yet she was a little disappointed. But even when she found out about that, she didn't spill the beans, you know, she didn't tell Ryuuen that Ayanokouji was the mastermind. So yeah, that speaks a lot about Karuizawa, that she's not simply this spiteful person or this seeking for revenge person that will simply spill the beans on Ayanokouji because he did something bad to her. So yeah, that speaks a lot about her resilience. So yeah, I mean, that is actually pretty good, and that is the reason why Ayanokouji apologized to her, because she found out that she was being used by Ayanokouji. But yeah, I mean, she didn't simply care about that, because I mean, the thing that Ayanokouji went through this episode and the thing she has been doing with Ayanokouji, you know, trying to get class D promoted to class C, B, and A, hanging out with him, was more than enough for her to basically in a way forgive Ayanokouji. Although I don't think she thinks she's forgiving him, because I think she thinks there is no forgives to give to Ayanokouji. I mean, she simply wants to be by his side still. So yeah, I don't think she thinks she's forgiving him or anything like that, because I don't think she needs to do that. But either way, she says herself that all the things that she's been doing to this point with Ayanokouji, hanging out with him, trying to get Class D promoted and things of that nature, had actually made her a better person, has actually made her, really happy and really enjoy this part of her and this part of being in school that she didn't knew until this point that she's now hanging out with Ayanokouji. So yeah, of course, she's grateful to Ayanokouji and even more now in this episode because of the thing he did for her. So yeah, pretty epic episode, pretty epic 12th episode. I thought it was going to be the 13th episode. I thought the development we saw in this episode we were going to see in the 13th episode. So I'm pretty curious what we are going to see in the 13th episode, because like I said already, the thing that happened in this episode I thought were going to happen in the 13th episode. I thought this 12th episode was going to be a little bit more delayed, in the sense that it was going to drag out things that happened in the past episode, in the 11th episode. But no, that was not the case. It actually ended the things that happened in the 11th episode. So yeah, that is actually pretty surprising, and I am actually wondering how they are going to handle the 13th and last episode, because this episode was really hyped, the most hyped out of all the first and second season. So they have to end it with a banger. It doesn't necessarily have to be packed with action like this episode was, but it does need to end with a banger, because it is pretty difficult to top out this episode, this 12th episode, but it doesn't necessarily have to go out of its way to top it out. It simply has to be good enough for everybody that is watching it to enjoy. So yeah, I hope they handle things well, and let's see what they do with the 13th and last episode. I guess another thing that was mentioned in this episode, the promise that Ayanokouji made with Horikita's brother, is that now Ayanokouji will actually have to, in a way, push Horikita to join the council, the student council. So yeah, that is something pretty interesting we will see in the future. But yeah, let's see if Horikita wants to do that. But yeah, that is everything for me. I hope you enjoyed my review, and I guess I'll see you all in the next episode review.